Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I'm really excited to have Robert Patin, who is a fractional CFO as well as agency scale partner at Creative Agency Success. Robert, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Of course. I always love it when I have people with a finance background on because that is not my background or my forte. But it's something that's so important in business, whether you are an agency or whether you're just trying to start any kind of entrepreneurship journey. So will you unfold that a little bit? Talk about your past, what you did, and then how did you pivot to what you do today?
The sort of core to the finance background to begin with was that my dad was a CPA and is a CPA. So I literally did my first tax return and financial closure when I was 12 years old.
Oh my God.
So I have been doing this since I was really young. So it feels like the back of my hand at this point. A super analytical person, like total type A. And when it was time for me to decide what I was going to do when I grew up, I decided to actually go and pursue a fine art degree. So I went to photography school, something that I absolutely loved and have always been enamored with art. I later kind of learned that the creative mind is something that I'm really drawn to because it's so different than how I see the world and how my brain kind of functions. So I tried to foster that creative ability in myself. But after having owned a photography business and shooting loads of weddings is what I was doing at the time, I realized that I absolutely was not meant to do that. And I hated my life. So I shut the business down and I traveled the world for about a year, ended up coming back, had spent every dollar that I had at the time and had to go back into something that I had a background in. So I went into accounting and landed a job at an agency, and I found the place that I was meant to be, this creative, parallel to creative minds and being around creative people that I just absolutely adored, and also married a fine artist myself as well. And it was this great sort of mix between my analytical that I was born with and the creative end of business. So I found this place that I really felt like I was meant to be, and being able to help creatives with what I was born with.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like there's such a parallel to creative minds. I mean, that's why it's STEAM, not just STEM now, right? Think about my daughter. She is a science mind, but she loves art as well. So, but something that really struck me in what you just said is the fact that you took something you really love doing and you turned it into your work, which is what a lot of us do when we start this journey, right? We say, what do we really love? What are we passionate about? But then it became work. So it was no longer just a fun creative outlet for you. It turned into this whole other beast, and you had to go, okay, wait, let me take a step back and do this other thing that I was innately born to do, finance and numbers, but still be able to apply that to a creative field.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of kind of what we, like as we were mentioning before we went into recording, that there's this idea of what you think you want to do and who you are, especially at that age, right? I was in my late teens, early 20s to begin with when I had decided what I had wanted to pursue. And there was still so much more self-exploration that needed to happen for me to be able to figure out really more what I was meant to do. And largely what I ended up finding is the core of what I really absolutely enjoy about the creative mind is actually see creatives as the pathway for society to improve the world. It's how we invent new things. It's how we improve society. It's how we're able to connect in a lot of ways, right? I see it as a very emotional experience myself. And unfortunately, there is the phrase, the starving artist, for a reason. And I think society has wrongly pushed down the belief system around the creative mind. We've elevated the accountant, the lawyer, the analytical brain, which I absolutely enjoy because I'm that person. But I also think that progress is dependent upon the creative. And so being able to actually help the creative person, being able to help more people and do what they're meant to do, like that's where I found my personal meaning in my life as well. So just being able to work with people and have them be able to see their own worth in this world, as well as having other people appreciate it the way that I do, is why I love what I do.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I feel the same way about teaching and teachers, right? Something that's a little underappreciated, but something that's so important to help everybody learn how to use all the different parts of their brain and how to become really great citizens.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know that you love to talk about, and that's something that you've done, is successfully take a marketing agency from being $350,000 in debt to over $1.75 million in profit. Talk to us about that, because this is something, whether you're an agency or you're an entrepreneur starting a small business, so many people don't know what they don't know, and they don't think about all of the different things. I know when I started my agency, I was like, I'm going to make everybody employees and I'm going to give them benefits. And I didn't think about, well, what happens if two people don't pay their invoices on time, or a client decides to stiff you, or you try to grow too fast. So all of these things are things I know I've had to personally learn. So I wish I had your playbook, and we'll talk about your podcast and your book as well. But what was that experience like, and how far into your journey of agency life was that?
That was actually the first agency I worked at. So I had been working in public accounting for many years, but here's where the agency was when I first started. They had grown. They were doing about 7 million a year in revenue. The year before, they had lost 2 of their anchor clients, so had reduced in size by 85%. And so they had gone from a team of over 30 people down to 3 or 4 at that point with some contractors and stuff, and were riddled with debt because they had tried to maintain the team, tried to sell, hadn't let go of the team kind of quickly enough at that point of what was happening. So they had accumulated debt. In fact, their bank account was actually negative the day that I started. And I didn't even know that was possible, that the bank would let you go that far negative. And so I had to go through initial kind of triage to get everything back to cash positive. So cash flow management, negotiation with vendors, all that sort of stuff to get to where we needed to be. And then the first thing that I really looked at was the pricing model. They were an experiential agency, still are. And that specific component, or the sub niche of the overarching marketing industry, has categorically some of the worst margins. And so I spent loads of time working with the business development person to be able to create a model that allowed for the business to be profitable, cash flow wise, project wise, and allowed for this agency over the course of a couple of years to go from what is the typical gross margin of somewhere between 30 to maybe 40% to being in the 68 to 75% gross margin, which is just completely unheard of.
Yeah.
In building this mechanism to understand and know exactly what needed to go into every single one of these event activations. And with the increase in price then results in, how do you sell it? How do you position? You're so much more expensive than everyone else, right? So we went through positioning exercises, differentiation exercises. How are we going to sell this? I tell this story quite a lot, but I remember the first sales meeting that I was ever in at this agency, and the client came into the office and we went through like capabilities conversations and all of that. And the prospective client left and everyone was like, yeah, we rocked that meeting. We did so well. And I sat there kind of quietly letting them celebrate for a moment. And I said, I don't know if you guys were part of the same meeting I was, but that's not at all what happened. They were bored out of their mind. Like they went from like engaged at the beginning of the call to looking like they were about to fall asleep. And it's like, we have to completely change this. This is not how we should be going about it. We need to be building relationships. The business and service-based businesses are all, it's relationship-based, right? So how do you build a relationship, create safety, build connection, human to human? And how do you humanize the sales process? So we went through that. And once we started to sell quite a lot, then we had lots of operational things that we had to fix. It was a fun journey, but I learned so much. And we were able to go from that sub 1 million by the time I had joined and grew past the $10 million line over the course of a couple of years.
So it sounds like you did a lot more than just come in as the finance guy.
The thing I love about numbers is that there's a story behind it, right? And I'm able to now read a financial statement and say, all right, here's an operational problem. I see you have a sales problem. I see you have this problem. And then I can go to kind of triage that component of the business. I see, as an analytical person, I would believe this, but I kind of see numbers as the ability to kind of have your finger on the jugular of the business, if you will, right? I'm able to see kind of what's going on and then understand the story behind what those numbers are ultimately telling me. So then I can go to solve for that problem. So as we fix one, and largely that's how business is, right? You fix one problem, another one emerges. And so how do we solve for the next component, the next stage of growth?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, is this some of the stuff that you talk about on your podcast and in your book?
100%. The agency blueprints kind of genesis was around the idea that largely I couldn't work with every single agency out there. So I wanted to, how can I actually share this information of what I've learned working with so many agencies to allow for it to be in the fingertips or the hands of loads of agency owners. So it's loads of stories of different agencies and how you can go about it, and kind of my playbook of how I think about growing an agency and how I've seen that kind of work out. I mean, obviously there's nuance to every situation. And the podcast, the mindset that I had around that was, how can I create like this library for that nuance, right? So I like to think of my podcast, the Agency Blueprint, it's like, think about it as like a library wall of loads of different books with different business challenges that you're facing, and gonna go just pick this one off the shelf because that's the problem I'm having today, and listen to that podcast, and it goes through kind of what you should be doing with that specific scenario, how to think about it, and ultimately be able to solve that challenge.
Interesting. I love that. And that's something I think is why podcasts are so valuable. And it's one of the things I love, because every episode is a different guest who's going to talk about a different topic, slightly different, that somebody needs to hear right at that time. And oftentimes it's me that needs to hear it as well as the listeners, right? So which came first, the podcast or the book or your agency?
Well, I mean, they all kind of worked around each other, right? So I initially had started consulting with agencies after having worked at a couple internally. The book came next, and then the podcast after that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And talk about creative agency success. So you still consult with agencies, and do some of them come in when they're first starting up? Do they all come to you when they're in crisis mode? Are they all different stages? What does that look like?
There's loads of different stages really that they'll come to work with me. There's kind of two buckets really that I work with agencies. Ones that are in the 250,000 in revenue typically to about the 2 million. And I'm working with them on setting up kind of the core foundation of the agency to allow for them to be in a bit more of a scalable model. So how to not be in that high of an agency life to the lows of the agency life, to be able to actually have like a sustainable business and be able to reclaim what they wanted their life to be rather than living someone else's. One of the things that I see loads on this industry specifically is that others that have accomplished creating an agency that was successful and they chartered their own path really, right? And I think it's both good and bad that that information is being shared, but largely, I don't think that my job is to tell you how you should live your life. My job is to help you create the life that you want. And there's loads of nuance in how a business is ultimately going to grow. And my kind of superpower zone of genius is thinking about the hundreds of agencies that I've worked with over time and creating an equation that is meant specifically for that agency owner, that agency service model, and then the client that they work with, and creating that right equation that's meant for them to create the life that they're looking for with that vision understood. And then the agencies that are 2 million to 10, 15 at the top end, I'm working with them to mentor their leadership team so that the CEO can be the visionary. And I'm working with the leadership team to install the systems that they need to continue to grow and scale.
Fantastic. Is there any one or two or three issues that are kind of common threads when you start to work with agencies that you see are mistakes people are making or roads they're going down that you need to course correct?
I would say the first one, that is the biggest one, is doing things because you believe that you have to.
Okay.
And so they get kind of stuck in this trap of like, hey, this is what someone else did, and so I'm going to have to go do it this exact way. I have to. And I think that largely entrepreneurs do this kind of component as well of like, I have to sacrifice my life. I have to sacrifice myself in order for me to have what I want. But what I've learned painstakingly with all the bruises and scrapes along the way myself is that the greater amount of focus, the less I do is actually how I was able to accomplish greater success. And largely it's the same thing as well for agencies. Do less, do the thing that you are really amazing at. You're more energized, you're more passionate, you're more excited, you're more magnetic when you're in that place, and you feel better. You jump out of bed the next day to want to do it. When you have that amount of energy, it allows for your life to be able to course that trajectory that you're wanting to go. And that's one of the most common things. And the other thing is, how do you actually manage time? How do you get out of your own way, if you will?
Yeah, those both are so big. I feel like we are the ones who put up the roadblocks, and it's not that we can't do it. It's just that something is keeping us from taking that next step and taking action and setting up the right time management systems. And then for overcomplicating processes or like trying to do too much, I feel like now we've come to a place where a lot of us do integrated marketing, right? So when I started my firm, it was during the pandemic and I'm only going to do PR. But then I realized that so many clients needed other services and they were small startup clients. They didn't have big budgets. So I quickly added, okay, we'll do websites, we'll do social media, we'll do all this other stuff. There were still a lot of things that we didn't do, but that scope creep comes in, right? And then you're trying to be all things to all people. And some agencies can do it really well. And I do think there is a point because I know I'm not as effective in PR. Like I know journalists are going to look at social media. They're going to look at the website. They're going to look at all the other components. And so everything needs to be cohesive, but those might not be my genius, to your point. So how do you combat that when so many of us are, I think, struggling with how much is too much, how little is too little? What's the happy medium? And I guess that would be part of when you're walking through solutions and that equation for that specific agency. But I didn't know if you had another answer you could throw out.
I have loads of thoughts on this, really. But like I said, to begin with, there's loads of nuance around this. So I want to be careful in like making massive generalities and then sending someone on the wrong course. But here's ultimately my overarching kind of belief system around this is that what ends up happening when you end up taking on more work, and largely you and many agency owners have many, many, many years of experience. And so you end up becoming the glass ceiling for your business because there's only so much of you to go around. And then in order to replace you, you're either really expensive to replace, to hire someone that has the same level of experience. And then even if you're able to do that, you're beholden on that person. So it's a very difficult model to scale. Now, as far as whether you need to be offering these things, I think that this is more of an internal monologue than it really ends up being the truth for many clients. There's components of truth to that really, right? Because if you've got a small business that has 4 different channels that they're ultimately marketing in, and I may not even be recommending that to that small business in the first place, but they don't have the time or the internal capacity to be able to manage different agency partners to be able to do and have some cohesion between it, right? So if you want to have more of an integrated marketing strategy, have white label partners or someone else that you can work with to be able to create that appropriately. What I see happen so often is you do this one thing particularly well. And so this client that you're working with is over the moon with the work that you created in this specific vertical. And then they're like, well, hey, can you do this other thing too? Like, I trust you so much with this thing that you've done for me. And now can you go do this other thing as well? And you're like, yeah, I'll figure it out, right? Kind of response. And it's not profitable for you. The result for the client is kind of lackluster. So that thing that you did really well before, you're now supplementing it with a thing that you kind of did okay, maybe even passable, but not phenomenally like you did that initial thing. Whatever it is that is your zone of genius, you end up kind of damaging the relationship that you have with a client. And then you end up creating an exit for a client when if you had just stayed
in your lane,
you would have had a longer lasting, better relationship with the client rather than saying, hey, why don't I find someone that is an expert in this particular area and we'll work together to develop this for you. The analogy that I give regarding this is like, let's say that I've got my car at the local mechanic and then my computer's motherboard just decides to short out. Am I going to take my computer and go down to the mechanic and say, hey, fix my computer? And then the worry is, well, if I don't do that for the client, then they're going to say goodbye, right? They're going to go find someone else. And if the mechanic says to me, yeah, okay, I'll fix it, my feeling would probably be, I don't know that I trust you to fix my brakes anymore because you're fixing computers and my car. Like, I don't know that I trust you with my family anymore. Yeah. So I'm going to take both of that business relationship away. Whereas if the mechanic said, actually, I have a friend that does computer repair down the street, I'm going to go ahead and put you in touch with them and they do a phenomenal job, I would feel more comfortable in that scenario, right? But we tell ourselves that we have to do this thing. We have to be everything to this client when all we end up doing is you suffer, your team suffers, and the client suffers. For what reason? Nobody wins.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really great analogy. I feel like maybe you've shared that before.
Yes.
And I'm here for it. I'm glad that you're sharing it here too. So talk about subjectivity. How do you remove subjectivity and get to outcome-based selling? I feel like a lot of us also, people don't like public speaking. They don't like being salesy, but they have to know what they're really good at and how to sell it appropriately to get to those higher levels that you're talking about.
So let's talk about the distinction between outcome-based selling and like the tactical kind of tool selling, right? I hate to break it to anyone that's listening, that if you think that what a client is coming to buy from you is a logo or a website or a brochure, that's not what they're actually buying. They're buying a business outcome, right? That might be the tool, right? The hammer that they're utilizing to do so, but it's a tool to be able to get there, right? And so you have to actually start to think about what is the thing that this client is ultimately looking to accomplish. Otherwise, we are commoditizing ourselves by selling it as a logo or as a hammer. It really gets my internal kind of blood pressure going when I see an agency website with like this like laundry list, like a Costco receipt of different services that you offer. It's like, it creates this dynamic of where the client then is in control. I was in a sales conversation yesterday with a larger agency. They're in the 3 to 4 million in revenue. And he said to me, this is the oddest sales call I've ever had. I never felt sold to ever throughout this conversation. You gathered a couple pieces of information. You gave me loads of advice. I now trust you that you know exactly what it is that you're talking about. And now I don't even know what you sell, but I want to buy it. And that's kind of the place that ultimately I want agencies to be, right? Is get rid of this, like, I've got to be this used car salesman. I've got to have this script that does exactly this thing. Is that when you're in your zone of genius, you're doing what you know like the back of your hand so well, you can have a conversation with a prospective client and just provide them with value. So how do you go about removing that salesy oriented kind of mindset and align what it is that you do well, what the outcome that you're able to accomplish with the client? I mean, there's kind of tactical things that if you'd like me to kind of go down that, I can explain a little bit more as well, but that's kind of the overarching mindset around it.
Right. Yeah. I'd love for you to keep on going, get into some of the tactical aspects as well. But I do think what you've said is really important. We are selling products or services, right, that will help with an outcome. Whether my line of work right now, it would be more students are attending that university or that college or going into basic education programs to get a certification, to get a better job, to create a better outcome for their family, but also for that region, right? Creating the right workforce for that region. So we know what those numbers are. For the most part, we're able to map back, but sometimes we also get clients who maybe it's more of a passion project and they really don't know what they want the outcomes to be. And we're trying to pull it out of them. It makes it a little harder. Yeah, that's a different case, but I'm going off on a little narrative because you're getting me thinking about all these different things right now as we're having this conversation. And I'm like, okay, I need to like take a whole bunch of notes as soon as we get off this interview. But yeah. Yeah, please.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit in that what you just described for yourself as well, if that's okay. I believe that the outcome of what they're looking for largely is the same. And for the vast majority of human beings, and now we're going to go kind of diving into psychology a little bit, but ultimately the thing that every single human being on the planet cares about is how am I perceived? Both how do I perceive myself and how does the rest of the world perceive me? So whether they're looking to allow for the betterment of their family and being able to have financial security, which is obviously kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of component of it too, right? But whether it's a passion project, it's how do I perceive myself in success of what I'm able to do? And the same thing for your other students as well, as thinking about it from that perspective. And the core of any sale conversation, in my opinion, is to get to that emotional reason why. Is how do you have a really truly connected conversation? So what I'll go through in every kind of overarching sales training that I'll go through with agency owners is how do you ask more meaningful questions and dig deeper? Like we'll surface level touch the things that we need to, but how do I ask a little bit more? So just, when you're cutting an onion, for example, right? And you're cutting a bit deeper in, the deeper in that you go, the more that it's going to create that teary-eyed response. You kind of want to do that a bit in a sales conversation. Is how do you ask just another question that gets to the deeper reason why for them? And this may be something they've never said out loud.
Yeah.
And if you're able to get them to talk to you about it, then you're going to have built a relationship, a safety between the two of you, a human connection that otherwise they don't have with anyone else. Mm-hmm. And if think about every relationship that you've built in your life, your closest friends, your closest family members, why are they the closest ones to you? Because you've shared something deep and meaningful with them. And if you're able to do that with prospective clients and build that relationship in that conversation, mind you, with the business outcome in mind as well, then you're able to remove this tactical component of you now become a pair of hands for me to create a logo versus you now understand me in an intrinsic, deep, meaningful way that now I trust you to understand the vision of my business to then be able to create a logo that is actually me, of the thing that I am projecting out there into the world and what I am saying about myself and how other people perceive me. Yeah. So you've built this relationship that makes it completely different. It's less about price. It's more about, I now feel safe with you, which every single human being on the planet wants. Right. Safety and security.
Yeah. I love that. So let's go back to, you said you could walk us through some tactics as well to go with the psychology side.
Yeah. So With the kind of base conversation, the discovery call or strategy session, the kind of basic framework that I use for it is the first kind of component is that you want to first show them that this is kind of your meeting, right? Like they're not in control. They need to have a dynamic of a relationship between the two of you, that you're the advisor, right? That you're not really a peer, you're an advisor. So the first thing that you want to do is ask them a couple of questions. And so I'll kind of hit a typical script of, hey, Nika, we've got an hour on the phone call today. Just want to make sure that works for you. And so I'm getting a yes from you, right? And I'm now controlling the conversation. I'm doing that at the very beginning. And, hey, the goal of this conversation is to get into depth about where you are and really get into understand your business, what you're looking to accomplish, so that we can see how or if we can help you. Does that sound okay?
Mm.
And so I'm looking at ideally get 3 yeses from you at the start to get you into the mode of saying yes to me.
I'm bought in.
I got already bought. Where's my credit card? And then you kind of hit background of you need to understand kind of what the lay of the land is. And this is where you're going to collect the conversion numbers of where they are, revenue numbers of where they are, budget information, all that kind of stuff. You spend 5 minutes or so there. And then you kind of want to start to future cast a bit. Where are they looking to go in the next 2 to 3 years? Of what does that look like for them? How exactly is this project that they're looking to accomplish, or where they currently are? How does that impact that? And then you spend the vast majority of the call actually nailing down in these challenges of where they are. So they've been thinking about this for a while. I'm sure they've tried to solve this problem before. What exactly is going on? Why is now the time to do it? What have they tried? What worked? What didn't? Why couldn't they do it without you? Mm-hmm. So you're now defining the gap for them.
Yeah.
And largely that's the goal of it, really, is to say, all right, you can see this cavernous Grand Canyon of a gap that you see in front of you. But guess what? I've got a bridge actually over here that we can just walk along together and show you exactly how we can do this.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's great. I'm going to be listening to this episode a few times. Also, I've downloaded your book, but now I'm like, okay, I need to read that over this weekend. Listen to some episodes of your podcast. All the different things. So let's talk about that. You have 2 books. Is that correct? The Agent's Blueprint and then the Practical Agency?
Yeah. So they were both written for 2 different stages of agency. So the Practical Agency is meant for the agency that's in the $50,000 to $100,000 of annual revenue that's looking to grow to that 7-figure line to $1 million plus in revenue. So it's really focused on that core foundation. And then the Agency Blueprint is more meant for the larger agency that's now wanting to scale. They understand a little bit more about who they are, what it is that they're wanting to accomplish, where their zone of genius is, but how do you actually bring together a team, make sure you stay in scope, understand like the kind of components of that next stage of growth is what the distinction is between the 2 books.
Okay, fantastic. And I love that you're still finding ways to go through creative pursuits with writing, with podcasting, all of that, besides using your analytical creative mind on the financial side and helping agencies scale.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much attached to that, even just in my personal life. My husband and I, we just moved into a home in San Diego, and we have a hummingbird feeder that is like so crazy active. And we've been like slowing down video and playing with that and having fun with that. There's an owl outside of right above where we sit in the morning that was and we were photographing the owl. So yeah, absolutely something that I still absolutely enjoy to do and foster that component of my mind as well.
Wow. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with agency owners, either people who are starting out or people who are kind of stuck in that low 7 figures and really want to scale up? Is there one thing they could do today, one question that they can ask themselves that can help them start down this path of changing their business?
Yeah. What is the thing that I'm currently doing that I need to remove from my plate today so that I can spend the time where I actually need to be? What is the thing that I'm spending my time doing that is the most beneficial to me today and to future me? So how am I investing my time?
That hit me hard. That is definitely, I think, one of the other things with whether you own an agency or you're starting a business, all the distractions, right? All of the shiny bubbles that are around and all the things that we want to do because they sound fun or we think they're going to add value. But it is really important to take a step back and say, is this really going to add value? Is it adding value now? Or is it just getting in my way?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
100%.
Nice. And what is the best way for people to find you?
So there's two things that I would recommend. Check out my podcast. If you have a particular challenge that maybe we brought up in this episode or something else that you're looking to solve for, go ahead and check out my podcast, The Agency Blueprint. I've also put together a couple of downloads for your listeners as well. So if you go to creativeagencysuccess.com/your brand amplified, you'll find 3 different things that you can do there. A capabilities presentation. So it's ultimately how to go through the process of being able to present to a prospective buyer, but about who you are rather than about them. So turning it into aligning the two of you between why you are on the planet and what it is that you do very well to largely what they're looking to accomplish. So removing that cell and making it alignment oriented. And then a link to download my book, The Practical Agency. So there's a free ebook there as well. And if you're currently challenged with something and you're wanting to make some impact and wanting to solve something, I'm absolutely happy to jump on a call with you and talk through where you currently are and what my suggestion would be for your current circumstance. So there's a link to book a call as well.
Fantastic. I will put these in the show notes and in my newsletter and everywhere that this episode is promoted. So thank you so much. Robert, do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to share? Anything I left out? And also, do you have a favorite quote or mantra?
As far as a favorite quote, I would say that there's so many good quotes out there, but I would say one that I probably say the most is never let a good crisis go to waste. So just always be learning. Every single challenge that you're facing is an opportunity to be better and to learn from it. I don't look at when I bang my head against a wall every hour of the day, Monday through Friday, as a downfall. I see it as an opportunity for me to be better. And how can I do that? And what can I learn from this? So just ask yourself, what can I learn from this situation that I'm currently in and do it differently next time?
Okay, fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This is one of those episodes where I feel like everything that you shared is something that I personally want to think about and work on and work through. So thank you for coming on and educating me and educating all of my listeners as well on how to be better agency owners. And if you don't have a marketing agency, it's okay. These are all still things that you should be thinking about as you're going through the process of creating your business. If you're in that 7-figure stage and you are looking to get to the next stage, these are all questions that are relevant for you as well. So with that, Robert, thank you so much for being on Your Brand Amplified. I'm Annika Jackson, and I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.